Content Warning is a multiplayer horror game where you play as a group of friends going down in a diving bell to the old world to collect spooky footage that will later be uploaded to SpookTube at the end of every day. It is the same styled game as Lethal Company, but instead of collecting scrap for the company you work for, you are collecting footage of your friends dying for thousands of people to watch. In this video, I will be going over some of the enemies that you can encounter, actually all of the enemies that you can currently encounter, some of the unused enemies, and some unused items that have not currently been added into the game. Before we start, I would just like to say thank you to everybody who has supported the channel so far. We are officially over 1,000 subscribers, and it's mind-blowing. It's actually insane. Unfortunately, this video took longer than I wanted it to. It might not be my best work. I got a little burnt out working on it because I had to restart it about 4 times. I hope you all enjoy the video. This is Game Files Explained, exploring the enemies and unused assets of Content Warning. First off, I'm going to go over the enemies that you can find in the current version of Content Warning. An update came out on May 2nd that added 13 new monsters to the game. So those are also included in this video. I will mostly just give a pretty basic description and perhaps a way to counter them if need be. Also, just to make it a bit easier on myself, I will be going in alphabetical order. So, let's get started. The first enemy is the arms. It is a tall, lanky creature with coiled up arms that can extend to incredible lengths. Arms patrol around the map very slowly while playing accordion-like sounds. He has loud footstep sounds that are very easy to hear, and when he gets closer, he will start reaching out his long arms and try to grab the player. This will stop the accordion sounds. If it manages to grab a player, it will significantly slow them down and start rapidly dealing small amounts of damage. Now, they are very easy to outrun as they are very slow. However, if you get caught, you can actually use the shock stick to get out, or you can simply sprint jump away a few times, and similar to the snail who we'll get to later in the video, you can pretty easily get away. Next is the barnacle ball. It is a large, round creature with barnacles covering its torso. It uses squid-like tentacles that protrude from its torso to move around. The barnacle ball has 3 different attacks that it can use: a close-range tentacle swing, a medium-range tornado attack that will suck players in, and a long-range spit attack that creates a dust cloud that disorients players and deals small damage over time. The barnacle ball is hard to escape. However, the easiest way is to use the shock stick or goo ball to get some space and take as many corners as you can to slow the barnacle ball down. The enemies in this game don't really take corners very well, so usually you can just turn a lot and can get away from pretty much anything. Next is the Big Slap, possibly the most dangerous enemy in the game due to its incredible speed and aggression. The presence of Big Slap is indicated by a loud breathing sound as well as loud screaming when he is chasing someone. Big Slap will attempt to get close and slap the player, either cutting their health in half or killing them instantly. If he can't get close, he will attempt to lunge at the player, so it is recommended to not group up too much when Big Slap is around because he can hit all of you at once with that lunge. There are unfortunately no reliable ways to avoid Big Slap, other than leaving when you see or hear him in the distance. Basically just use the map geometry to slow him down as much as possible before he inevitably slaps you across the face and kills you instantly most of the time. The Black Hole Bot, our next enemy, is a large robotic entity with 4 screens pointing in different directions, each of them displaying a sinister expression, just an ASCII angry face. The bot will fly around the map searching for players. Once it finds one, it will land next to them and count down from 10 seconds. Getting far enough away will indeed stop the countdown. Once it finishes, the screens display another face. A black hole will emerge from the center of the entity and grow very slowly. It sucks anyone around it inside, instantly killing them. Also, just to mention that the black hole will indefinitely grow until either everyone is dead or there are no players left on the old world. It's pretty simple to get away from. Just when you see it land next to you and start counting down, simply run away, timer will reset, and it'll continue to do that over and over again until you eventually make it off the old world. Up next is the Bomber, a hunched-over humanoid creature with what looks to be severe deformities and mutations. He has skinny, malformed legs, 3 large fingered hands, and bones protruding from his skin, as well as bombs growing out of his back. The bomber will roam the map searching for players, and when he finds one, he will pull off a bomb and throw it at the player, instantly killing any player that is in its blast radius. The bombs have a 5-second fuse, so they aren't too difficult to run away from. If the player gets too close to the bomber, it will continuously jump towards them, lighting the bombs on his body before eventually blowing himself up in a kamikaze maneuver. This itself is a little more difficult than the bombs to get away from. He lunges kind of far. However, take corners, use geometry, get away from him. Pretty simple stuff. Next is the Cam Creep, an enemy that I personally have never seen. It is a tall, lanky, gray figure with a creepy smile and large eyes. He has really large arms, hands, and a very large head, and he is only visible on the camera. Because of that, you cannot normally see him. He will silently run toward the player that is holding the camera and attempt to snap the player's neck. If he is spotted by them, or is around a player for too long, he will run away for 20 seconds and repeat this cycle. He is very similar to the Bracken from Lethal Company, and can be countered in the same ways, and he can also be stunned by the shock stick. The dog, or gun dog, is a large robotic creature with a happy ASCII face akin to a player's. It has 4 legs that make an audible clunk sound when it steps, and it has a machine gun clearly mounted on its body with a flashlight beneath the barrel. The gun has a bright red reticle that is a very clear indication of its presence and where it's aiming. The dog will search the map, shining its light in various directions, and when it finds a player, the reticle will narrow onto their torso, and after about 2 to 3 seconds, it will start to shoot very quickly. The bullets do very minor damage, however, it racks up very fast because of the extreme fire rate that the dog has. The easiest way to avoid the dog is simply to run when you see the reticle and use corners to your advantage. A funny thing you can actually try if you want is that if you run at him while he is aiming at you, you can actually get into his face, which will make the front of the gun go through your hitbox and you won't take any damage. However, this is very dangerous to attempt because if you don't do it correctly, you will just die. Up next is the ear. It is a skeletal, 4-legged entity with a large ear for a head. He sort of resembles a deformed dog, except for the obvious ear on his head, and the ear is attracted to players' voices. They can hear from very far away, and when he hears a player, he will quickly move towards them and pounce, dealing minor damage, but also ragdolling the player against the floor. The ear is attracted to noise. However, he doesn't really like loud noise, and the easiest way to get rid of him is to literally shout at him. Be loud. Or you can simply use the shock stick. It's whatever you'd prefer. I just like yelling at him. The Eye Guy, weird name, is a large bird-like creature with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a circular body with 3 eyes on its body, 1 in the front and 2 on its back sides. Its footsteps make loud, squelchy sounds. The Eye Guy will spawn somewhere around the map and move periodically until a player approaches it. At this point, the monster will freeze. The Eye Guy will not move unless the player looks away or shines a light on him, which will aggravate him. A hostile Eye Guy will chase the player and stab them with its claws, killing a player in about 4 to 5 hits. After a little while, he will return to his neutral state. The easiest way to deal with this enemy is to just simply not shine a light on him, as he will stay in a neutral state until you do that. Next is the Fire Monster, another tall, 4-legged creature. However, this one closely resembles a turtle as opposed to the more dog-like creatures that we have seen. He has a shell and a very, very turtle-like head. The Fire Monster will walk towards the nearest player and start spewing flames from its mouth. The flames will linger on the ground for a few seconds, so that is a very dangerous thing. It can be brought down by using a shock stick. However, this will not stop the flames that are currently coming from its mouth. He will continue to shoot them. The best option is to take advantage of its very slow speed and simply run away, taking corners whenever possible. Next is my favorite entity, one of the coolest ones I have seen in a game in a long time, the Flicker. It is an extremely tall, lanky gray figure with a large red eye. When it is aggravated, it will shine a red light that can illuminate the entire room. If you look at him while this is happening, he will proceed to consume your life, represented visually as black tendrils creeping from your body towards the Flicker. Presence of the Flicker is indicated by every light on the map flickering multiple times over the course of 2 seconds. It will then stalk players while invisible, occasionally taunting by flickering in and out of existence. After taunting for a while, he will fully reveal himself, and if you look at him while he is fully revealed, it will cause you to be physically unable to look away, as attempting to will snap your camera back. After a few seconds of not being able to look away, you will instantly die, as at this point, he has now drawn all of your life out of your body. Now there are some counters to the Flicker. You can record him in selfie mode without getting attacked by him and dying, as well as he will only attack in places where he can fully stand up. If you really want to get some good footage without being in selfie mode, you can always send in one of your friends as a sacrifice. That is an option. Next is the Harpooner, a large humanoid wearing a baggy coat with a hood, and he carries around a harpoon gun, kind of a given his name. He will move towards a spotted player, and once in range he will load his harpoon gun and shoot it at the targeted player. If the player is shot, it deals a little bit of damage and restricts movement. The harpooner will then reel the player towards him, and if the player is close enough, the harpooner will then kick the player against a wall, dealing about half their health. You can snap the harpoon line by breaking line of sight with the harpooner, and some other counters to him are getting behind cover while he's loading the gun so he will not shoot, as well as using the shock stick and the goo ball. You can also use the rescue hook, another new item in the new update, to bring back a hooked player, because it will indeed break the line. Next is the Infiltrator, or the Imposter. It appears as a carbon copy of one of your teammates, and when the Infiltrator is alone with another player, and he has maintained eye contact for too long, its face and flashlight will blink red, and their face will change to an angry face. It will then chase the player. When the player is caught, it will look like they are being hugged by the Infiltrator. However, this will drain the player's health at a constant rate. The easiest way to counter the Infiltrator is to stay in groups of at least 2 players, as well as use the shock stick if they get too close. Next up is the Jelly. It is a large, gelatinous yellow creature that skitters around the map on 4 very stubby legs. The Jelly heavily resembles flowing water and is sometimes hard to spot in the dark. However, he is very shiny and will easily be illuminated and made visible by light. The Jelly will run to the closest player it can and trap them within its body. He is very quick and does not do any damage. However, he will drop the player off at the closest Slurper enemy, or if none are present on the map, he will drop them at the furthest point from the player's group. It is best to take quick turns and go up any stairwells you can find, and eventually he will lose track of you. If you are unable to do any of these, the shock stick always works. The Knifo is a small, knife-wielding, childlike entity that looks like it is wearing a cut-out bedsheet that carries a knife. Its presence is indicated by the sounds of a giggling child. He will wander around the map until a suitable target gets close enough. This creature will then begin chasing them around with a knife. He is slightly slower than the player's running speed, so you can outrun him, but he will switch targets to whoever is closest, or whoever they can get to, so you have to be careful of that. The Knifo will chase down its target until it is either bored, which can take up to 10 to 30 seconds, or you get far enough away for him to stop chasing you and chase someone else. The goo ball and the shock stick are good things to use to put some space in between you and the Knifo to escape, which is very needed as he can do quite a bit of damage. The larva is a large skeletal creature with the anatomy of a centipede. It has 2 large hands, 2 mandibles, and 7 eyes on its head. The larva will slowly slide around the map until it spawns a player. At this point, it will start to chase them at high speeds, somewhat slower than their run speed. When this creature gets close enough to its target, it will dash and grab them before hurling the player over its head and throwing them, dealing just below half of their health. I would recommend keeping your distance from the larva, as well as using the shock stick or the goo ball to get distance. You can also climb on map terrain if you need to, because he cannot get up very easily and will not be able to grab you. Next, the Mime is another tall humanoid creature with the outfit of a mime. I know, shocker. The Mime moves around the map by what looks like teleporting forward a small amount with a new walk pose every time, as if it is phasing in and out of reality. When it gets close to a player, it will target them and continue moving like this while chasing. Upon coming into contact with the player, it will instantly kill them and cause their body to ragdoll back. The shock stick can be used to stun the Mime, as well as he can relatively easily be outran. Alternatively, the Mime has an awkwardness level, where if a player is staring at it for a long time, or is too close to it, extremely close, for too long, he will just leave, as he will get too awkward. Up next is Ultra Knifo. It appears to be a figure larger than the player that wears a white cutout bedsheet incredibly similar to the one that the small Knifo uses, along with other characteristics that are similar to the Knifo, such as the small silver knife that they both wield. Ultra Knifo will roam around the map at a relatively slow speed along 3 other normal Knifos that follow it, searching for any players while it giggles in a low pitch similar to Knifo. Once it finds someone, it will look at them for a second before starting to chase them. Their speed is lower than the player's running speed, and after a while of chasing the player, the Ultra Knifo will stop and run away. The fact that Ultra Knifo's speed is slower than the player's run speed means that it is easy to escape as long as you have stamina. And just like the normal Knifo, the goo ball also works well to save a couple seconds. If you really need to get away though, you can get up close and use the shock stick. However, this is not recommended by me because they have a lot longer of a reach than the regular Knifo and you can get hit. Up next is the Mouth, which is a short humanoid creature with stubby limbs and an overly large football-shaped head, and overall it has a very cartoon-like body. Its eyes are small and very far apart on his face, and it has very distinguishable eye bags lying underneath and a large toothy grin. Mouth will single out a player as its target and will continuously attempt to run up behind them, and if the player is not looking at the Mouth, it will scream at the victim, sometimes continuously, to startle or scare them. The Mouth does not like being looked at, so if you feel someone is following you, it is advised to turn around. And you could just use the shock stick if you want, however these little guys are simply no harm to you, they don't do anything other than scream in your ears, so it is just a waste of battery. The Puffo is a small humanoid, hunched over with a swollen face. It has very pronounced ears, small 3-fingered hands, and most noticeably, it has a large spiky growth on its back. It will wander around the map until players approach it, in which case it will begin to follow the player. Its speed is equivalent to that of the snail, and when a player gets too close to the Puffo, it will inflate the growth on its back like a pufferfish, knocking the player back, causing them to ragdoll, and dealing minimal damage. Puffo can be countered via the shock stick, and it is also incredibly slow, so just walking or sprinting away can create enough distance for you to be safe. Up next is the Robot Button. It is a small robotic creature that will walk around on 4 stick legs, and it has a large red button on top of its body. Robot Button will roam around the map and follow players. It possesses little to no threat, however players are able to interact with the button on its surface using the E button. Interacting with this button will have a 50-50 chance of either an explosion occurring, killing both the robot and any players around it, or nothing except the sound of a button clicking. If you are a true gambler like me, there is simply no counter to this enemy, as you will simply press the button every time. However, if you are smart, it is fairly simple. Leave the button alone and keep it as a pet or something, it's pretty cute. Up next, an enemy I have talked about once already, it is the Slurper. It is an entity that inhabits the ceiling. They use a mechanical claw that is suspended from the middle of their mouths to catch prey from above. The string used to catch prey is either camouflaged or completely invisible, and because of this it can be very difficult to spot if you aren't used to looking on the ceiling. However, as long as you keep an eye on the ceiling, they are relatively easy to dodge and don't pose that much of a threat. Also, as a heads up, if a buddy gets caught in one, you can simply throw an object with Q at it to drop your friend and save them. Up next, the snail, which is probably the most common enemy that you will find in the old world, is a humanoid enemy with the head of a snail and also a shell on its back. They move very slowly and will constantly approach the player if they are near enough to recognize them. They are easy to avoid and only cause a small amount of damage if they catch you. They can spawn in singles or in groups, as well as from another enemy that I will talk about next, the snail spawner, and if they are spawned from that, they can spawn in groups as large as 25. So, the easiest way to deal with the normal snail is to simply walk away. They are very easily avoidable. Up next is the snail spawner. It is a floating, slug-like creature with a very long body. The body consists of two antennas at the front and short tube-like holes up and down the sides. Whenever it encounters a player, it will follow behind them, spewing an odd liquid that, when coming into contact with any surface, will spawn snails that will be dormant for a brief period of time. If a player doesn't go near the snails during the 6 seconds of dormancy, they'll faceplant back into the ground and disappear. However, if a player does go near them, the snails will begin their usual behavior and chase the player. The spawner itself cannot hurt the player, but the snails themselves tend to be the most challenging part. It spawns a ton of them, up to 25 as I said previously. They aren't super easy to avoid this time, like if there is a single snail or maybe 4 of them, as there are so many. Simply walk back to the ship while trying not to go anywhere near the snails is probably the easiest thing to do. However, if there are a ton in your way, honestly they won't be that hard to deal with considering they are just snails. You can still just sprint jump away from them if need be. You can also use the shock stick to give yourself some room to run. In my opinion, one of the scariest enemies is a shroomed player. This is caused by an item called the shroom. What happens is when a player picks up the shroom, for more than 3 seconds they will become infected and they will turn into a shroomed player. However, the infected player will not notice. They can still play completely normally, besides the fact that they will lunge towards any nearby uninfected player. To other players, the infected's voice will be horribly distorted and they will be covered in shrooms. This is simply counterable by not going near any shrooms that happen to be on the ground or on a table or something. Up next is the Snatcho. It is a perilous creature that stalks its prey and launches surprise attacks from behind. It is mostly seen outside, but it has a chance to appear inside structures as well. It can silently sneak up on players and attack from behind, and the way to deal with these guys is to simply shine light on them. If you shine a light on its entire body, it will disappear and will not attack. If, however, you do get caught, you do still have some time to be freed. However, another player will have to free you by shining their light on the Snatcho, because attempting to use your own will make you drop it. The easiest way to mostly remove the threat is to use the flare as a light source, as it will cover the Snatcho in light on its own. You won't have to aim the flashlight. Up next is the spider. It is a large arthropod biologically resembling a normal spider. However, its mouth is a clean vertical cut through the middle that separates its flat head into 2 sides. Each side of the spider's head has 3 large black indentations with 4 smaller ones surrounding it. These are presumably its eyes. The spider will roam around the map until it finds a player. Upon spotting a player, it will quickly crawl toward them and shoot webs at the same time. These webs, when coming into contact with any surface, will explode into multiple strands that will stick to players and make it hard to move. When spotted by the player, it is best to try to get to another room, or at least be a few rooms away from its location at all times. The spider is also able to be stunned by the shock stick and slowed down by the goo ball. Up next is the streamer, which is a larger version of the player character wearing heavier, more professional gear, equipped with a shock stick and a large camera. He wears 3 oxygen tanks instead of 1, and because of this he actually has 3 times the oxygen level as a normal player. and he has a large screen coming from behind his head that allows him to see his live chat audience. The streamer will roam around the map until it finds its target, at which point it will move toward the player and will shock them if they get too close. The streamer will move at a pace slightly slower than the player's walk speed, and getting shocked by the streamer deals a little over a quarter of your health. However, it will ragdoll you for 5 seconds, and because of this, the streamer can simply just keep shocking you until you die. This entity is vulnerable to a shock stick as well, and the goo ball also slows him down. Like Larva, however, the streamer can easily be avoided by getting on higher ground that he cannot reach. The Wallow is a large black monster with multiple hands that approach from its surface. Wallow's head and arms are the only visible part of its body. The Wallow is a monster which resides inside walls and teleports player into its own realm. Wallows cannot be seen until they slide out of cover, and when a player gets too close to the place where a Wallow is, the entity will move out of the wall and grab the player by its hands, making it impossible to escape. Wallows do not directly injure the players, but they do take them into a realm where danger awaits. Once a player escapes the realm by doing usually a parkour course of some kind, they will be teleported back to a random place on the map. Since the Wallows cannot be seen or discovered by any safe method, it is recommended not to stick to walls. The Wallow is most dangerous when players have low oxygen, as escaping the realm wastes time and wastes oxygen. Up next is the Weeping. It is a large silver cage with 2 robotic arms and a head. There are 2 arms on the cage, both with cartoonishly large hands at the ends. The Weeping has an oval-shaped head placed on top of its cage, that wears a face of anguish at all times. Weeping has a screen interface that has a large text box in the middle with a randomly generated CAPTCHA, including a smaller text box right below it where the player is able to type. The bottom right of the screen states, "CAPTCHA, no robots allowed." The second interface, only visible to the trapped player, shows the amount of tries left until death, and the border of the screen represents how much time is left. The Weeping will wheel itself around the map until it finds a player. However, the Weeping is only able to move if it is not being looked at or in line of sight of any player. If this entity manages to get within grabbing range of a player, it will force the player into the cage and shut it closed. Then, presenting a screen interface to the rest of the team, this screen will randomly generate a jumble of letters and characters which players must type back out in the exact same. Players have 1 minute to complete this puzzle or the trapped teammate will be killed. Failing to type the correct letter will result in losing 1 of 3 attempts at the puzzle. After a teammate is killed by the Weeping, the entity will no longer be violent and will stand in place. Upon a successful CAPTCHA, the Weeping will don a smile and vanish, becoming neutral for a period. The easiest counter to the Weeping is to back away while staring at it and attempt to enter other rooms, as it seems the Weeping struggles to follow players between areas. Unfortunately, the shock stick has no effect on it. Up next is the Whisk. It is a humanoid creature with a whisk for a head. It has 5 types found in the game files, however only the normal whisk head version is used. The other types are fan, hammer, iron, and vacuum, and I will go over these a bit more later. They attack by charging forward in a straight line at extremely high speeds, dealing around 70 to 90% HP on hit. They can be very dangerous, especially in really tight corridors, however they are extremely easy to dodge simply by moving to the side. Dodging the attack for long enough will cause the Whisk to give up for a time and run away. Lastly, the Worm is a worm-like entity, as you could have guessed, and it has a long, segmented body that almost resembles a spine, and 2 leech-like mouths full of serrated teeth on either side. The Worm will slowly approach a player and attempt to latch onto them. Once latched onto one player, the other end of the Worm will seek out a nearby player. If successful, the 2 players will be linked together and forced to cooperate in order to navigate. This causes no damage and only serves as a slight nuisance. The Worm will eventually detach from both players, but has no cooldown on its ability to reattach, so players can be instantly linked again if they remain near the Worm. The Worm is rather slow, so if it attaches to you, make sure you notify your fellow teammates so they can avoid you, And if you are unfortunate enough to get linked to another player, make sure that you have good communication skills as to not get tripped up. Using a shock stick on the worm will instantly cause it to detach from any player it is currently attached to. That is currently all of the enemies that you can encounter in the game. There are quite a few, and it took a little while to go over all of them, so now let's get into the smaller list of unused things that you can still find in the game files. Firstly is the Angler Mimic. This is an enemy that takes the cake for the largest enemy in the files, being about the size of the small house you start in. The angler's appearance is very similar to both a chameleon and an actual anglerfish, the most noticeable difference being his large claws attached to his skinny arms. He has a gigantic blinding blue light that hangs from his head like an antenna, sort of like the one an anglerfish uses to lure in prey. The angler is a stationary entity who will create copies of players. The players it copies depends on who is furthest from the group, and the mimic will look exactly like them. These mimics will not talk and will taunt the player from afar. Attempting to get close to these mimics will cause them to run away in the direction of the angler, presumably hidden around the map. Getting too close to the angler will cause it to suck in players similar to a barnacle ball's tornado ability and eat them. The next thing I could find was the ghost enemy. However, all that I could find was the name of the enemy, and I have found nothing about its behavior or appearance. Safe to say this one is either relatively early on in development or sitting on the back burner for now. There is the possibility that it would work similar to Lethal Company's Ghost Girl, and I think that would be pretty cool. There is an unused item called the Grabber Arm that appears in the game files. It currently cannot be bought and does not spawn naturally. It is a long pole with 2 prongs on the end that close to grab things when activated, and it could be used to grab an item, player, or a monster from slightly farther away. This probably isn't in the game because they have the rescue hook to rescue players, and you probably don't have the need for this, although I could see it being used to grab things like the mushrooms without being infected by them. Next is the Mimic Man. It is another unused enemy. It looks like a spider with a vat from the old world resting on their back. Their face looks like a puppet with its buttonish eyes. Its mouth is filled with razor-sharp teeth, and it has 6 long legs. The Mimic Man will stay where it was spawned at, and when a player goes near it, it will start to walk towards them at speeds faster than the player's run speed. After a while, he will return to his spawn point. This creature is susceptible to the shock stick. Lastly, there are some unused enemies simply named toolkit enemies. It refers to the different versions of the whisk enemy that I talked about before. They are the exact same except for the tool that is used for their head. The unused ones consist of a fan head, a hammer head, an iron head, and a vacuum head. It is safe to assume that they would work exactly the same way the whisk enemy does, just with a different head, although there is a case to make for them having different behaviors, such as instead of sprinting at you at high speeds, the hammerhead could walk up and simply hit you with the hammer that it has for a head. And that's it for now. I would like to thank you all for watching and for the support on the channel recently. I am officially over 1,000 subscribers, and it is mind-blowing. Unfortunately, this video took a lot longer than I wanted to make, as I ended up changing the topic of the script about 3 times before I settled on this one, so I ended up writing 4 scripts, and here we are with this one. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Hopefully it will not take as long to come out.